You're described as a very habitual person. Where did that come from?
Oh, that might have come from the Tim Ferriss podcast. I don't think I'm more habitual than anybody else. I think human beings are entirely creatures of habit. As a young children are born with no habit loops. They're essentially born as blank slates, and then they habituate themselves to things and they learn patterns and they get conditioned and they use that to get through everyday life. And habits are good. Habits can allow you to background process certain things so that your neocortex, your frontal lobe stays available to solve brand new problems. But we also unconsciously pick up habits in the background and we keep them for decades. And we may not realize that they're bad for us, so we're ready to move on from them. To some extent, our attitude in life, our mood, our happiness levels, depression levels, these are also habits. Do we judge people? How often do we eat? What kinds of food do we eat? Do we walk or do we sit? Do we move? Do we exercise? Do we read? These are habits as well. You absolutely need habits to function. You cannot solve every problem in life as if it's the first time it's thrown at you. But what we do is we accumulate all these habits. We put them in the bundle of identity, ego, ourselves, and then we get attached to that. I'm Shane. This is the way I am. I'm Naval. This is the way I am. And it's really important to be able to uncondition yourself, to be able to take your habits apart and say, oh, okay, well, that's a habit that I probably picked up from when I was a toddler and I was trying to get my parents' attention. And now I've just reinforced it and reinforced it and reinforced it. And I call it part of my identity. But is it serving me anymore? Is it making me happier? Is it making me healthier? Is it making me accomplish whatever I want to set out to accomplish right now? So I don't think I'm any more. In fact, I would argue I'm less habitual than most people. Like I don't like to structure my day. But to the extent that I do have habits, I'm trying to make them more deliberate rather than the accidents of history.
So what's a habit that you're trying to change right now? What are you working on?
Well, I did a lot of habit changes over the last few years. So I've now got a daily workout that I do, which is a great habit. I cut down heavily on drinking. It's not fully eliminated, but it's mostly gone. I dropped caffeine. I'm not on the paleo diet, although I like to be. So I'm on a variation of it that I call the failio diet, which is I try to be paleo, but I fail constantly. But I don't beat myself up over it because I feel that even approximating towards it is better than where I have been historically. Like that, I tried to build a meditation habit, but I failed. But I have made a habit of being meditative. So I've gone through lots of habits. Probably the one that I'm currently would like to cultivate is doing yoga more regularly, but I haven't formulated a plan around that. And by the way, I reject a lot of the stuff that's being peddled around today about how you form and break habits. I know there's this very popular book, one that I even recommended, which talks about the science behind habits. And one of its depressing conclusions, I think this came out of Stanford, was that you can't break habits, you can only replace them. And that's BS. I've definitely broken habits completely. And so I think you can uncondition yourself. You can untrain yourself. It's just hard. So it just takes work. It takes effort. And usually the big habit changes come when there's strong desire motivators attached to them. So the yoga one I'm going to work on. I don't yet have a great plan on that one. I haven't tackled that one properly yet. A big habit that I'm working on, which is going to be really hard to explain in any way that any normal human being will understand this, but I'm trying to turn off my monkey mind. I think when we're born as children, we're pretty blank slates. We're living very much in the moment, and we're essentially just reacting to our environment through our instincts, and we're living in what I would call the real world. And then when puberty comes along, that's the onset of desire. It's the first time you really, really want something, and you start long-range planning for it. And then because of that, you start thinking a lot, and you start building an identity and an ego to go and get what you want. And this is all normal and healthy. It's part of being the human animal. But I think at some point it gets out of control. And then we are constantly just talking to ourselves in our heads. We're playing little movies in our heads, walking down the street, but no one's actually there. Now, of course, you started voicing this thought in your head that you're always having, you'd be a madman and they'd lock you up. But the reality is, if you walk down the street and there are 1,000 people in the street, I think all 1,000 are talking to themselves in their head at any given point. They're constantly judging everything that they see. They're playing back movies of things that happened to them yesterday. They're living in fantasy worlds of what's going to happen tomorrow. And they're just pulled out of base reality. And that can be good when you're doing long range planning. It can be good when you're solving problems. It's good for the survival and replication machines that we are. But I think it's actually very bad for your happiness. And so, in my mind, the mind should be a servant or a tool, my master. It's not something that should be controlling me and driving me 24/7. So I've taken on this idea that I want to break the habit of uncontrolled thinking. Which is hard because if I say to you, don't think of a pink elephant, I just put a pink elephant in your head. So it's an almost impossible problem. So it's more something that has to be guided by feel than guided by actual thinking or thought process. But I'm deliberately cultivating experiences, states of mind, locations, activities that will help me get out of my mind. And I know, all of society does that to some extent. In some sense, the people chasing thrills in action sports or flow states or orgasm or any of these states that people really strive to get to, a lot of these are basically just trying to get out of your own head. They're trying to get away from that voice in your head and this overdeveloped sense of self. And at the very least, I do not want my sense of self to continue to develop and become stronger as I get older. I want it to be weaker and more muted, so that I can live much more in present everyday reality and accept nature and the world for what it is, and appreciate it very much as a child would, and then not have to seek happiness through external circumstances, chasing to fit some preconceived notion that I have.
Wow, there's a lot there I want to ask questions on. Is there a difference
that's a tough one. That'll take years. That's not a 6-month habit. That's a 10-year habit.
The simplest way to do this is to scale a habit down. And so in the book, I talk about this thing I call the 2-minute rule. And the idea is you just take whatever habit you're trying to build and you scale it down to the first 2 minutes. And I had a reader who did something similar to this. He ended up losing over 100 pounds. And one of the ways that he did it was he went to the gym, but he wasn't allowed to stay for longer than 5 minutes. So sounds kind of crazy, but for the first 6 weeks, he went and he showed up and he did like half an exercise, and then he would leave and go home. And to most people, they hear that and they're like, well, it's kind of ridiculous. You're wasting your time. You're not actually going to get in shape from that. But the point is he was mastering the art of showing up. And a habit has to be established before it can be improved. Until you become the person who shows up every day, there's nothing to optimize. Mm-hmm. We're so worried about figuring out the best diet plan or the best business idea or the optimal way to, boost my bench press or whatever, we search for all these perfect plans, but we don't do the thing that is fundamental to all of it, which is just showing up. And the 2-minute rule is one way to do that. You want to do 30 minutes of yoga? Well, let's translate that into take out your yoga mat. Or if you want to read 30 books a year, let's translate that into read 1 page. Mm-hmm. But whatever the first 2 minutes are of the behavior, scale it down, master that, master the art of showing up, make it as easy as possible to get started. And then once you become that person and you're going to the gym every day or you're reading 1 page every day, well, now you have options. Now you have choices and you can upgrade and improve from there.